You think she loves you because she's soft. No. Sometimes softness is a strategy. Sometimes affection is control wrapped in warmth. And attention isn't always love. Sometimes it's leverage. The truth is, the most dangerous games don't feel like manipulation. They feel like intimacy. That's why they're so hard to see. Every time you forgive too quickly, every time you chase her approval, you're feeding the very system that weakens your mind and drains your power. Most men don't get broken by women. They get broken by the illusions women create. But once you learn how these emotional games work, you'll never play on the losing side again. You've probably been there. Confused, questioning yourself, trying harder each time she pulls away, thinking if you just show more love, more effort, she'll finally meet you halfway. But she doesn't. Instead, she becomes colder, more in control, more certain she can shift your emotions anytime she wants. That's the invisible price of trying to keep her happy. You lose your self-respect every time you trade your truth for her peace. And I know you're tired of it. Tired of being the one who always bends just to avoid another argument, another silence, another emotional storm. If you're ready to see through the illusions and understand how female psychology really operates beneath the surface, like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, have you ever felt her love turn into control? Because what you're about to hear will reveal the 5 darkest mind games women play, and the mindset that makes you untouchable once you recognize them. Let's begin. 1. The emotional mirror game. In the beginning, she mirrors everything about you, the way you talk, the way you laugh, even the rhythm of your energy. You think you finally met someone who understands you on a deeper level, someone who gets your soul without you even having to explain it. That's how the emotional mirror game begins. It's not an accident. It's a psychological tactic built on emotional imitation, and it's one of the most powerful tools women use when they want to gain control over a man's mind. When a woman mirrors your emotions, it creates a sense of intense familiarity. You start to feel safe, comfortable, even addicted. You start lowering your guard because it feels like she's a reflection of you. But what's really happening is that she's studying your emotional blueprint, learning exactly how to pull your strings later. At first, this mirroring feels magical. She laughs at the same things you do. She agrees with your opinions, and she shares the same dreams and values. You think it's destiny, but what it really is data collection. Every reaction you give her becomes a piece of information. She notes what excites you, what offends you, what makes you insecure, and what calms you down. Once she has that data, she begins to shape her personality around your expectations, making you believe she's the perfect woman. And once you believe that, your brain starts to associate her with emotional safety. That's when she gains control. Because the moment someone makes you feel emotionally understood, they can influence how you think, how you react, and even how you define love. Then something subtle changes. The reflection starts to fade. The woman who once matched your energy starts pulling away. The same warmth that made you feel alive now turns cold. You start asking yourself what changed. You replay every moment, trying to figure out where you went wrong. That's the trap. She conditions your brain to chase the old version of her, the one she created using your emotions. You start craving the connection she gave you, not realizing it was designed to make you dependent. Every time she withdraws, you try harder to get that mirror back. You text more, call more, overthink more. That's how she gains psychological power, by making you chase something that never truly existed. This emotional mirroring isn't about love, it's about leverage. By reflecting your best qualities, she makes you fall for an illusion. You're not falling for her, you're falling for yourself, projected back at you through her words and gestures. That's why it feels so intense, and that's why it's so hard to walk away. Because in your mind, leaving her feels like losing a part of yourself. She uses that bond to test your emotional limits. When she senses you're hooked, she starts flipping the mirror. Instead of reflecting your confidence, she reflects your insecurities. Instead of mirroring your joy, she mirrors your frustration. She begins to amplify your emotional weaknesses, not your strengths. Suddenly, the woman who once lifted you up is now the reason you feel lost. And the more you try to understand her, the more trapped you become. She becomes unpredictable, sometimes loving, sometimes distant. And that inconsistency keeps your brain in a loop of anxiety and hope. It's emotional conditioning, not connection. Your mind starts linking pain with affection, chaos with love, and confusion with intimacy. That's when she fully controls the narrative. She decides when you feel peace and when you feel pain. And you, unknowingly, hand her the power to do it. That's the dark psychology behind the emotional mirror game. It's never about who she is, but who she can make you believe she is, based on who you are deep inside. 2. The hot and cold trap. The hot and cold trap is one of the most confusing and addictive psychological games a woman can play. It's not chaos by accident. It's emotional strategy by design. It starts with intensity, warmth, affection, and an energy that feels electric. She makes you feel wanted, chosen, and special. You begin to think this is the connection you've been waiting for. She gives you her attention like you're the only man in her world. Every word, every look, every gesture feels intentional, and you start believing this level of passion must mean something real. But just when you begin to relax and trust it, she shifts. The warmth disappears. The affection fades. Suddenly, she's distant, distracted, and cold. The same woman who couldn't go a day without talking to you now acts like she barely remembers your existence. That shift hits hard. It confuses your brain and creates emotional withdrawal. You start questioning yourself. Did I say something wrong? Did I do something to upset her? You replay every conversation, every message, trying to decode where things went wrong. That's exactly how she gains control. Because when you're busy trying to solve her behavior, you're no longer thinking logically. You're reacting emotionally. The cycle of hot and cold keeps you addicted. When she's hot, your brain releases dopamine, the pleasure chemical that makes you feel euphoric and connected. When she goes cold, your dopamine drops, leaving you in emotional pain. That pain makes you crave the warmth again, and you start chasing it, doing anything to bring it back. It's not love anymore. It's dependency. The hot and cold trap is about power disguised as passion. She learns that the more inconsistent she becomes, the more effort you'll put in to stabilize things. You'll start apologizing for things you didn't even do. You'll start competing for her attention, thinking if you just prove your worth, she'll return to how she was before. But that's the illusion. There is no before. The initial warmth wasn't the real her. It was the bait. The coldness is what reveals the truth. She knows how to control your emotional thermostat. Too much warmth and you might get comfortable. Too much cold and you might walk away. So she keeps the temperature shifting, just enough to keep you off balance, just enough to keep you hooked. What makes this trap so dangerous is that it preys on a man's natural instinct to fix things. Men are problem solvers by nature. When something's broken, they want to repair it. So when a woman who once adored you suddenly pulls away, your mind tells you there must be a reason, and that if you just find it, you can make things right again. But the truth is, she doesn't want you to fix it. She wants you to chase. Every time you chase her warmth, you reinforce her power. She realizes she can control your emotions simply by switching between affection and distance. It becomes a test, not of your love, but of your self-control. How much are you willing to tolerate just to feel wanted again? Over time, this pattern reprograms your brain. You start associating emotional reward with unpredictability. You start mistaking instability for intensity. You tell yourself that the highs are worth the lows, that maybe all relationships are this complicated. But deep down, you know something isn't right. You find yourself craving her validation more than her presence. You start to lose your emotional balance because she's controlling the rhythm of your connection. One day she's your peace, the next, she's your storm. And because the cycle always repeats, you start to believe this chaos is love. The hot and cold trap is not about emotional confusion. It's about emotional conditioning. It's how a woman trains your nervous system to respond to her inconsistency. You stop expecting stability and start settling for moments of warmth that never last. She becomes both the source of your happiness and the cause of your pain. And the more you try to hold on to her, the more you lose your sense of control, trapped in a cycle where every withdrawal feels like punishment and every return feels like salvation. 3. The silent punishment. The silent punishment is one of the most subtle yet psychologically destructive games a woman can play. It's not about yelling, arguing, or confrontation. It's about silence. Deliberate, strategic silence that cuts deeper than words ever could. When she's upset or disappointed, she doesn't need to raise her voice. She simply withdraws. The warmth in her tone disappears. Her messages get shorter. Her expressions go blank. The woman who once filled your world with attention suddenly becomes unreachable. And that emptiness starts to consume you from the inside. You start wondering what happened, what you did wrong, and why she won't just talk to you. But that's the trick. She wants you to feel that confusion. She wants you to chase answers that she will never give directly. In the beginning, you might think she just needs space. You tell yourself she's processing, that it's just a mood swing, or that she'll come around. But the silence doesn't fade. It lingers. It stretches long enough to make you anxious, guilty, and desperate. You start overanalyzing every detail, every word you said, every look you gave, every message you sent. You convince yourself that you're the problem, that if you can just fix whatever she's feeling, things will go back to normal. But that's exactly the control she wants, because in that silence, she isn't losing power. She's gaining it. Every second you spend trying to figure her out is a second you're emotionally surrendering to her. The silent punishment works because it preys on a man's natural need for resolution. Men prefer clarity, direction, closure. They want to fix things quickly and move forward, but silence gives no closure, no clarity, no direction. It traps you in uncertainty, forcing you to chase her communication. The more she withholds it, the more valuable it becomes. Suddenly, you're the one apologizing, even if you didn't do anything wrong. You start walking on eggshells, adjusting your behavior to avoid triggering that silence again. You become more careful, more compliant, more controlled. What was once a relationship of equals turns into a psychological hierarchy. Her silence becomes law, and your peace becomes dependent on her breaking it. What makes this tactic even darker is how calm it looks from the outside. She's not shouting, not insulting, not even being rude. She's just quiet. And that quietness is impossible to fight. You can't argue with silence. You can't defend yourself against someone who won't engage. So instead you turn inward. You blame yourself. You become your own enemy. You start questioning your worth, your decisions, and your emotions. The silence begins to echo inside you until you start believing that you're the one who's unworthy of her attention. That's the psychological trap. The punishment doesn't come through words. It comes through your own thoughts. Over time, the silent punishment becomes her way of controlling emotional outcomes. If you disagree with her, she goes silent. If you call out her behavior, she goes silent. If you stop giving her attention, she goes silent. It's no longer just a reaction. It's a weapon. She learns that silence makes you fold faster than anger ever could. She learns that when she disappears emotionally, you'll chase her validation. It's a power play disguised as emotional withdrawal, and the more she uses it, the more your nervous system learns to associate her silence with danger. You become anxious when she's quiet, relieved when she finally speaks, and grateful when she gives you even a small amount of warmth again. The silent punishment works because it trains you to fear disconnection. You stop expressing your real thoughts because you don't want to risk that silence returning. You stop setting boundaries because you've learned that any form of resistance will be met with emotional distance. You end up managing her moods instead of your own needs, and what's left of you is a version of yourself built around her reactions, cautious, apologetic, and constantly trying to earn back her attention. 4. The comparison game. The comparison game is one of the most manipulative psychological tools used to destabilize a man's confidence while appearing harmless on the surface. It doesn't begin with open insults or criticism. It begins subtly. A comment about an ex, a compliment toward another man, a casual mention of how someone else does things differently. She'll say it like it's nothing, like it's just part of normal conversation. But every time she does, she plants a seed in your mind, a seed of doubt. Doubt about your worth, about whether you're enough, about whether she secretly wants someone else. And once that seed grows, she doesn't need to criticize you directly. Your own thoughts will do the work for her. At first, you might brush it off. You tell yourself it's harmless. Maybe she's just being honest or expressing an opinion. But as time goes on, it keeps happening. She'll mention how her ex was more spontaneous, how a coworker has ambition, how a friend's boyfriend treats her better. She won't say it to hurt you outright. She'll say it in a way that sounds unintentional, like it just slipped out. But the effect is deliberate. Each comparison hits a different part of your ego. Each one makes you wonder what she's really thinking. And soon, you find yourself competing with ghosts, Men who aren't even in her life anymore but still manage to control how you see yourself. The genius of the comparison game lies in its subtlety. It's not open conflict, it's emotional erosion. She doesn't attack your masculinity directly, she lets you do it yourself. You start changing your behavior, not because she asked you to, but because you want to prove you're better than whoever she mentioned. If she praises someone's ambition, you push yourself harder. If she mentions another man's looks, you start feeling self-conscious. If she talks about someone being more romantic, you start overcompensating. Slowly, you're no longer being yourself. You're being a version of yourself shaped by her approval. The comparison game feeds on insecurity, and once it finds a weak spot, it multiplies. She learns which comments trigger you the most. Maybe it's your success, your appearance, your emotional expression. Once she identifies it, she'll use it to test how deeply she can influence your emotions. She might say something as small as, "You never do things like that," or, "He's just confident without trying." And then watch how you respond. If you react defensively, she knows she has control. If you start justifying yourself, she knows she's gotten into your head. What she's really doing is setting a psychological hierarchy, not between you and other men, but between you and her. She becomes the judge, and you become the one trying to prove yourself worthy of her validation. Over time, this constant comparison starts to alter your sense of self. You begin to feel like nothing you do is enough. Even your best efforts start feeling small because she always has someone else to measure them against. It's a cycle that keeps you in emotional debt, always trying to earn approval that never comes. The more you give, the higher she raises the standard. And the more she raises it, the more exhausted you become. You start believing that maybe you're the problem, that maybe you're not doing enough. But the truth is, no man can win a game where the rules are constantly changing. That's the power of the comparison game. It doesn't just make you question your place in her life, it makes you question your identity as a man. What makes it even darker is how easily it can be disguised as motivation. She might tell you she's just pushing you to be better, or that she's just being honest. But honesty without empathy is manipulation. She's not trying to inspire you, she's trying to destabilize you. Because the more insecure you become, the easier it is for her to control the emotional rhythm of the relationship. When she wants your attention, she can dangle validation like a reward. When she wants you submissive, she can withdraw it and remind you how someone else would have done better. The game isn't about the other men she mentions. It's about how she makes you feel when she does. It's about power disguised as comparison, control disguised as casual conversation, and insecurity disguised as honesty. 5. The control through vulnerability. The control through vulnerability game is one of the most deceptive psychological traps a woman can use because it doesn't start with manipulation. It starts with emotion. It begins with her showing you pieces of her soul. The way she opens up about her past, her fears, her heartbreaks, her insecurities, it all feels real, raw, and genuine. You feel trusted. You feel chosen. You think you're seeing a side of her that no one else has access to, and that's exactly what makes it powerful. Vulnerability creates intimacy, and intimacy creates emotional loyalty. The moment she lets you into her private world, you start feeling responsible for her pain, and that's when the control begins. She tells you about the people who hurt her, about how she's afraid of being betrayed, about how she's never met a man who truly understood her. You listen, and you promise yourself that you'll be different. You'll protect her, love her right, and never be the reason she cries again. What you don't realize is that your empathy has just become her leverage, because now she doesn't have to demand loyalty. She's already earned it through your guilt and your compassion. Every time you think of walking away or setting a boundary, that image of her pain flashes in your mind. You start making decisions not from logic but from emotion. You stay, even when you're unhappy, because you feel like leaving her would make you the villain in her story. The control through vulnerability works because it makes you feel morally bound. You start prioritizing her emotional stability over your own. You begin to filter your words, soften your truths, and hide your frustrations just to avoid triggering her pain. And the more careful you become, the more control she gains. She knows that all she has to do is remind you of how fragile she is, and you'll fall back in line. It's not about love anymore. It's about emotional conditioning. She turns her weakness into power, using it to shape how you respond to her. Every time she cries, withdraws, or talks about being hurt again, it pulls you deeper into her emotional orbit. But the manipulation doesn't stop there. Once she knows you're emotionally invested, she begins to reverse the roles. The woman who once appeared vulnerable starts using that same vulnerability as a weapon. When you express frustration or try to hold her accountable, she plays the victim. Suddenly, you're the one being insensitive, cold, or just like everyone else. She twists your concern into cruelty, your honesty into attack. The moment you try to set boundaries, she collapses into emotion, tears, silence, sadness. And because you've been conditioned to protect her, you cave. You apologize for things that weren't wrong. You fix problems that weren't yours. You keep the peace at the cost of your own peace. The more this dynamic continues, the more trapped you become. Her vulnerability keeps you emotionally tethered, but her behavior keeps you off balance. You start to realize that every time you think about confronting her, you hesitate. You hesitate because you remember how she told you she's been abandoned before. You hesitate because you don't want to be the next man who hurts her. You hesitate because deep down, you've been trained to protect her even from your own truth. That's the essence of her control. She doesn't force it through dominance or demand. She achieves it through emotional guilt. She makes you believe that protecting her pain is more important than protecting your sanity. What makes this game so dangerous is that it hides behind genuine emotion. She doesn't need to manipulate you with lies or drama. She manipulates you through empathy. Every man who values emotional connection becomes a perfect target because the same qualities that make you loving and loyal also make you vulnerable to psychological capture. She doesn't have to raise her voice or threaten to leave. She just has to look hurt, and you'll do the work for her. You'll chase her comfort, you'll take the blame, and you'll keep the cycle alive. In the end, the control through vulnerability game isn't about weakness at all. It's about the silent domination that comes from making you believe her pain is your responsibility.